writing she didn't have to say anything. The way her fingers brushed mine, that light, almost accidental touch, was enough to make me forget what I was supposed to be doing. Maybe it was just habit for her, a polite gesture, but it felt like she'd reached right through the noise in my head and silenced it. That it started on a quiet afternoon, one of those hours that feel too still to be real. She was standing by the open window of the small art studio, light spilling over her shoulders, catching the edges of her hair. Everything about her seemed deliberate, yet effortless, the way she held her coffee, the slow turn of her head when she noticed me. "Did you find the sketches?" she asked, voice calm but carrying something unspoken beneath it. That I nodded, though it took me a second to remember what she'd asked. "Yeah, they're here," I said, setting the folder down on the table between us. The air felt heavier there, like the space had learned to hold secrets. She smiled, not quite meeting my eyes. "You look like you haven't slept." I laughed softly, trying to sound casual. I didn't know this project came with personal evaluations. That earned me a real smile, the kind that broke through the calm. She turned slightly, reaching for a paintbrush that wasn't there, and her hand brushed against mine again, quick, unplanned, but neither of us moved away this time. The warmth stayed. For a second, I thought she might say something. Instead, she just looked at me, her lips parting like a thought was forming but never made it out. I should have stepped back, given her space. I didn't. There's something about silence when it's shared, it stops being empty. It becomes a language. "You ever notice," I said quietly, "how people touch things differently when they care about them?" She glanced up, brow slightly furrowed, curious. "What do you mean?" I hesitated. "You handle your brushes like they're alive. Like you're afraid to push too hard." Her expression softened, not flattered, not amused, just quietly seen. "That's not something people usually notice." "Maybe they don't look long enough," I said. Her eyes lingered on mine then, too long for it to mean nothing, too brief to be safe. The distance between us wasn't even a full step, but it might as well have been the length of a confession. The room smelled faintly of turpentine and coffee, and every sound outside, a car door slamming, someone's laughter in the distance, felt miles away. She turned back to the window, her shoulders tightening, voice low. "You shouldn't say things like that." "I didn't mean." "Yes, you did," she said softly, almost kindly. "That's what makes it worse." I didn't know how to answer. She wasn't angry, she was careful. Like someone who learned what happens when you let something begin that you can't finish. Her hand rested on the windowsill, fingers tapping once before going still. I could tell she was thinking, maybe about the line she'd just drawn, maybe about how easily it could vanish. "I should get back to work," she said finally. "Of course," I murmured, though neither of us moved. The light outside shifted, a slow gold creeping across the wall. She turned slightly, her profile caught in that glow, and for a heartbeat she looked at me again, not with permission, not with apology, but something in between. Then came the sound of footsteps in the hall, close, unexpected. Her gaze flicked toward the door, then back to me, her voice barely rose above a whisper. "Don't say anything." And before I could ask why, the door handle turned, variant, standard, title, her touch said everything her words couldn't. Part 2, expanding the conflict, ID, 62108, the sound of footsteps faded down the hallway, leaving behind the kind of silence that only exists after you've almost been caught. She exhaled slowly, like she'd been holding her breath for too long. "I didn't expect anyone back this early," she said, still facing the window. "Who was it?" "Probably one of the students," she said, brushing it off. "It doesn't matter." but the way her voice wavered told me it did. I stayed quiet, watching the tension roll through her shoulders. The sunlight had shifted again, and her reflection in the glass was faint, like she was both there and not. "You used to teach full-time?" I asked. She nodded, still not turning around. "Until last year. I thought I needed a break. Turns out I just got used to being alone." It wasn't what she said, it was how she said it. No bitterness, no drama. Just quiet truth. I hesitated before speaking. "Someone hurt you?" She turned then, finally meeting my eyes. "We all get hurt. It's what makes us careful." There was something in the way she said careful that made it sound like a warning, not just for her, but for me too. I wanted to ask more, but instead I picked up one of the sketches from the table. A woman, mid-motion, her face half turned away, lines unfinished. "This one's different," I said. "You didn't complete it." "I couldn't," she admitted softly. "Sometimes you stop before you ruin what's already beautiful." The words landed heavier than I expected. She stepped closer, her scent a mix of coffee and the faintest trace of something floral. Her hand brushed the edge of the paper I was holding, then hovered near mine. Not quite touching, but close enough that I could feel the warmth radiating from her skin. "You're too young to understand that," she murmured. I almost smiled. "I'm not sure age has much to do with it." She looked up at me then, and something flickered, not surprise, exactly, but recognition. As if she saw a thought she'd been trying not to have reflected right back at her. Her voice softened. "You remind me of someone I used to know. Someone you cared about." Her breath caught. "Someone I should have left alone." The words hung between us like static. She took a slow step back, her composure returning, the confident woman again. But her hand lingered briefly on my shoulder before she passed. That touch undid every attempt at restraint. My pulse jumped, my thoughts scattered. I pretended to study the sketches again, but I could still feel the ghost of her fingers, a warmth that refused to fade. She paused by the door, watching me. "You don't know what you're doing," she said gently. "Maybe not," I said, lifting my gaze to hers. "But neither do you." Her lips parted, no denial, no retort. Just silence. Then, after a long pause, she crossed the room again, stopped beside me, and whispered, "That's what scares me." Her hand brushed mine as she took the sketch from my fingers, skin against skin, brief, trembling, deliberate. Neither of us moved away. Variant, standard, title, her touch said everything her words couldn't. Part 3, heightening suspense, ID, 62109, the next few days blurred together, quiet visits, brief exchanges, both of us pretending nothing had shifted. But the air between us had changed, even silence carried weight now. That afternoon, the rain came early, drumming softly against the studio windows. She was setting up a still life, sleeves rolled to her elbows, hair loosely tied back. I stood by the doorway, pretending to organize supplies, though my eyes kept finding her. "You can come closer," she said without looking up. "You hovering there makes me nervous." I moved beside her, heart beating faster than it should have. "Sorry." "Force of habit." She smiled faintly. "You have strange habits." The smell of rain mixed with the faint scent of turpentine. I could hear every small sound, the soft drag of her breath, the brush tapping against glass. Her shoulder brushed mine once, accidentally. Then again, not so accidentally. You ever think, I asked quietly, that some people come into your life at the wrong time? She froze mid-stroke, the brush suspended. All the time. Our eyes met, and neither of us looked away. The tension wasn't sudden anymore, it had been building, brick by brick, waiting for one careless breath to bring it down. Before I could say anything else, the door creaked open. A man's voice called out, "You left your phone in the lounge, Miriam." She turned sharply, stepping back so fast her brush clattered onto the table. "Thank you, Daniel," she said, her voice calm but too quick. "Just leave it there." He hesitated, eyes flicking between us, me standing too close, her trying to look unbothered. "Right. Okay." He set the phone down and left, the door clicking shut behind him. The silence that followed was deafening. She pressed a hand to her forehead, laughing softly but without humor. "You see what I mean about wrong timing?" I wanted to say something reassuring, but she looked so tired, not from work, but from fighting something she couldn't name. "He doesn't know anything," I said finally. "Doesn't matter," she whispered. "People always see more than they should." She moved toward the table, reaching for a cloth, but her hand trembled slightly. I stepped closer without thinking, steadying it. My fingers closed around hers, warm, tense, unmoving. She didn't pull away. Her breath hitched, I felt it before I heard it. We stood like that, too close, not speaking, both aware of everything unsaid. Her gaze flicked down to my lips, then up again, sharp with self-control. "This can't happen," she murmured. "I know." But neither of us stepped back. The sound of rain grew louder, the world outside fading. Her hand was still in mine, her pulse quick beneath my thumb. For a moment, she leaned in, just slightly, just enough to erase the space between us. I could feel her breath against my skin, the faint tremor that betrayed everything her words refused to. Then she caught herself, eyes closing, pulling in a slow, steady breath. "Go," she said softly. "Before I forget why I shouldn't." I didn't move. She opened her eyes again, meeting mine, and in that quiet, trembling look, it was clear, we were already too far past forgetting. Variant, standard, title, her touch said everything her words couldn't. Part 4, nearing the climax, ID, 62110, the next evening, the studio felt different, quieter, heavier. The rain had passed, but the air still held its damp breath. She was already there when I arrived, sitting on the edge of the desk, her fingers tracing the rim of a half-empty mug. "You came back," she said without looking at me. I wasn't sure if I should. "You shouldn't have." Her tone was firm, but she didn't move away when I stepped closer. We stood in the fading light, the room dim except for the faint glow from a desk lamp. I could see the exhaustion in her face, not from work, but from holding herself together too long. "Miriam," I started, unsure of what I was asking. She sighed, rubbing at her temple. "You think this is simple, don't you? That because we feel something, it has to mean something." I took a breath. "It does mean something." She looked up at me then, eyes sharp but glistening. "You don't understand what it's like to be judged for wanting what you're not supposed to want." Her voice broke slightly at the end, and before I could think, I reached out, brushed a strand of hair from her face. She didn't flinch, didn't look away. "I don't care what people think," I said softly. "That's because they've never looked at you the way they look at me," she whispered. "A woman my age doesn't get to be reckless." Her hand came up, resting against my chest as if to push me away, but she didn't. The warmth of her palm burned through the fabric. "You make it hard to remember my own rules," she said, barely audible. Her breath mingled with mine. Every heartbeat felt louder than the world outside. I could smell the faint trace of paint on her hands, the warmth of her skin, the soft tremor in her voice. "You keep saying this is wrong," I murmured, "but you're still here." Her lips parted, a breath, not an answer. She leaned closer, eyes flicking between my mouth and my eyes, torn between wanting and running. "I shouldn't want this," she whispered. "But I do." The words hit like a confession and a surrender at once. My pulse stumbled, her hand slid up, resting lightly against my jaw. Every instinct screamed to close the distance, but neither of us dared to cross it. Then, a sharp buzz, her phone vibrating on the table behind us. The sound broke the moment like glass. She froze, hands still against my face, eyes wide. Neither of us turned toward it. "Miriam," I said, voice low, rough with everything I wasn't saying. "If I walk away now, I won't come back." Her gaze trembled, fear, want, regret, all tangled together. She took one small step closer, her voice barely above a breath. "Then don't walk away." The phone buzzed again. The air between us cracked with the weight of what would happen next. She lifted her chin slightly, just enough that I could feel her breath brush against my lips. One heartbeat, two, before the studio door creaked open behind us. Variant, standard, title, her touch said everything her words couldn't. Part 5, the twist, ID, 62111, the door opened halfway before stopping. Daniel's voice filled the space again, too familiar now. "Miriam? You left this." He paused when he saw us, frozen just inches apart. Her hand dropped from my face so quickly it left the ghost of warmth behind. "Daniel," she said, too evenly, "what are you doing here?" He hesitated, eyes flicking between us. I forgot my jacket." Didn't mean to interrupt. The air in the room turned solid. I could feel her stiffen beside me, see the color drain from her face as she forced a smile. "You didn't," she said. "I was just helping him with some final sketches." Daniel nodded slowly, but his expression said he didn't believe it. He looked at me once more, then back at her. "You sure that's all it is?" The question landed like a blade. She straightened. "Yes. That's all." He held her gaze a moment longer, then turned and left, the door closing too loudly behind him. When the silence returned, it wasn't the same kind as before, this one hurt to breathe in. She sank onto the edge of the table, pressing a hand to her mouth. "He saw," she whispered. "He knows." I took a cautious step forward. "Knows what?" "We didn't, it doesn't matter," she cut in, voice trembling. "Rumors don't need proof. They just need air." Her eyes met mine, and I saw it there, not just fear, but something deeper, shame. "Miriam," I started, but she shook her head. "I told you this couldn't happen," she said. "You don't understand what it costs me." Something in her voice cracked, and before I could stop myself, I reached for her hand. She let me, barely, her fingers cold and unsteady. "Tell me," I said softly. "What are you so afraid of losing?" Her lips parted, and for a long moment, she didn't answer. Then, quietly, myself. The word hit harder than any accusation could. I wanted to tell her she wouldn't lose herself, that I saw her clearer than anyone else did, but she was already pulling away, standing too fast. Her shoulder brushed mine as she passed, and that small contact felt like both apology and punishment. "You should go," she said, voice shaking, "before you make this worse for both of us." I didn't move. "You think this is just about me wanting you?" Her head turned sharply. "It's not," I continued, stepping closer despite everything. "It's about you not letting anyone want you anymore." Her breath caught, just once, and I knew I'd hit something real. She turned then, eyes bright, tears she wouldn't let fall gathering. "You think this is simple?" "No," I said quietly. "But it's honest." She didn't reply. Instead, she reached out, brushing her fingertips along my arm, a trembling, fleeting touch, then whispered, "Honest doesn't mean safe." And as she walked past me toward the door, she stopped just long enough to add, almost to herself, "But maybe it's time I stopped being safe." The door closed behind her, leaving only the echo of her words and the soft, unsteady thud of my heart, knowing that whatever happened next, neither of us could undo what had just begun. Variant, standard, title, her touch said everything her words couldn't. Part 6, the climax, ID, 62112, the next night, she didn't wait for me to knock. The studio door was already open, the light spilling onto the hallway floor like an invitation she'd been fighting not to make. She stood by the easel, arms crossed, the room scattered with unfinished sketches. Her voice was quiet, but steady. "You came anyway." "I had to." "You shouldn't have." I stepped inside, closing the door behind me. "You said you wanted to stop being safe." That silenced her. Her eyes shifted, uncertain. "I didn't mean, yes, you did," I said. "And you know it." For a moment, neither of us moved. The rain had started again, tapping softly against the window. It filled the silence between our breaths. "You don't understand what this means," she whispered. "Then explain it to me." Her lips parted, but the words faltered. "It means if I let this happen, I won't know how to stop wanting it." I took a step closer, one, then another, until there was barely an inch of air between us. I could feel the warmth radiating from her skin, the soft tremor in her breath. "Maybe you're not supposed to stop," I murmured. Her eyes lifted to mine, full of fear and something that looked too much like hope. "You make it sound easy." "It isn't," I said. "But pretending doesn't make it go away." She looked at me for a long time, as if memorizing the moment before deciding whether to destroy it. Then she reached up, brushing her hand against my face, slow, tentative, her thumb resting just below my mouth. "I've spent years keeping people at a distance," she said softly. "You show up, and suddenly I can't breathe without wondering if you're here." Her confession hit like a heartbeat between us. My hand found hers, fingers sliding into the spaces between. The air grew heavier, the rain louder. She leaned in, just enough for her breath to graze my jaw. "If we do this, there's no taking it back." "I know." Her eyes closed, her forehead resting lightly against mine. Every hesitation, every doubt, every unspoken plea seemed to fold into that single touch. Then, just when the space between us vanished, she whispered, "Tell me this isn't just about wanting." "It's not," I said. "It's about finding something I didn't think existed." Her breath caught, a soft sound, half a sigh, half surrender. Her fingers tightened around mine. And then she kissed me. Not rushed or reckless, but slow, searching, fragile. The kind of kiss that asks more questions than it answers. When she finally pulled away, her eyes were wet, her smile small and unsteady. "Now you understand," she whispered. "I do," I said. "Completely." The storm outside swelled, wind rattling the windowpane. Inside, everything was still, two people finally done pretending, standing in the middle of something they could no longer hide from, no longer name, no longer undo. Variant, standard, title, her touch said everything her words couldn't. Part 7, the conclusion, ID, 62113, the morning after the storm, the city felt washed clean, the kind of morning that looks like a new beginning but still carries the weight of what happened the night before. I found her at the studio, same as always. She was sitting by the window, light spilling across her hands. For a long moment, I just stood there, afraid to disturb the peace she'd built around herself. "You're early," she said without turning around. "So are you." "I couldn't sleep," she admitted. "Me neither." She finally looked at me, and there it was, no defenses, no half-smile to hide behind. Just her. The woman who'd spent so long keeping everyone out that she'd forgotten what it felt like to be seen. "I thought about what you said," she began. "About not letting anyone want me." I took a step closer, careful, slow. "And?" Her fingers tightened around her coffee mug. "You were right. I stopped believing I was allowed to be wanted, not like that. Not without apology." Her honesty made my chest ache. I sat across from her, the table between us feeling smaller than ever. "You don't have to explain," I said quietly. "You just have to decide." She smiled, faint but real. "Decide if I'm ready to stop being careful?" I nodded. For a while, neither of us spoke. The light moved slowly across the floor. A brush rolled from the desk and landed softly near her feet. She didn't pick it up. Instead, she looked at me, really looked, and something in her eyes shifted. "I can't promise this will be easy," she said. "All right." "I don't want easy," I replied. "I just want real." She stood then, crossing the small space between us. Her hand brushed mine, hesitant at first, then deliberate. Our fingers intertwined, fitting together like something that had been waiting too long to happen. Her voice was barely a whisper. "You make me feel like I still have time." I stepped closer until I could feel her breath against my neck. "You do," I said. "We both do." She leaned her forehead against mine, closing her eyes. No words, no grand gestures, just the quiet rhythm of two people who'd finally stopped running from what they already knew. For the first time, the silence between us wasn't tense. It was peace. Her hand rested against my chest, her thumb tracing slow circles, grounding me. "Stay," she whispered. "I wasn't planning on leaving," I said, smiling. She smiled back, and in that small, imperfect moment, paint-stained hands, tired eyes, morning light, everything made sense. There was no fear left, only understanding. The age, the hesitation, the uncertainty, all of it faded into something simple, connection. And as she leaned against me, our hands still joined, the world outside carried on. But for once, neither of us felt the need to look away. Did you enjoy the story? What kind of stories would you like to hear next?